Do you know the saying, life is lived forwards, but understood backwards? I really, the older I get, I really see the truth in that quote. So what's coming up for me today, it's actually been coming up over the last couple of weeks to talk about, in some ways, to get more personal around my marriage, which I came out of many, many years ago. But I kind of want to talk about the truth about soulmates, relationship, marriage, divorce, our expectations, our ideas of how, relationship, I think, has really been hijacked by Disney, the definition of relationships. So there's a lot of expectation and therefore disappointment. But on a deeper level, it's like as we get older and we can understand how life is lived forwards, and in the middle of it, you can't really see the forest for the trees sometimes. And it's not until after the fact that you can look back and reflect, and you can garner the wisdom and the teachings and the lessons and the gifts of everything, right? And, sometimes if you find yourself in your 40s and 50s and 60s, you might look back and go, oh, well, God, that's not what I thought my life would be. But did we ever really know? Was it ever going to go to plan, quote unquote? So today I want to talk about, to just get real about relationship, about our expectations of life and how that might leave us feeling sometimes. So we'll see where it goes, but going to try and be as real and raw on this one as possible. So let's dive in. This is Corinne Bloom, and you're listening to Raw Conversations. So the memory that's coming up in my mind right now was when I was 21, I was working with a woman who was a hypnotherapist, and, shamanic work, dream work, EFT, all of these things. And I'll never forget that she told me that when it was her wedding day, she was standing at the altar, saying her vows. And she had this voice in her head that said, I'm not going to end up with this guy. Like, there's going to be an end to this. And yet she knew that she had to go on this journey. That always really stuck with me, because I think that we easily, because we've been influenced, if not, brainwashed by Disney, by rom-coms, to have a certain idealism, fantasy about relationship and even about life, getting all your ducks in a row. And when you do A, B, C, and D, that then you will have made it and your life will be happy and you live happily ever after. And that is the biggest crock of shit ever. There is no happily ever after. There's life. There's life. And of course, there are waves of joy and bliss and expansion. And then there are going to be waves where you get bashed up along the side of the cliff and, beaten, battered by the tides. And that's life, right? And I think that because we live under this illusion that everything needs to be fine, happy, positive all the time, we think that something has gone wrong, that we've made a mistake, that something must be wrong with us, that we fucked it up essentially, when life doesn't go all dandy, and it's not all puppy dogs and rainbows. Whereas if we just knew that life is life and it's filled with various experiences, and, who knows what our soul came here to learn, to experience, to live through. If we all just saw it as an experience that was neither good, bad, right, wrong, it would just be that, right? We wouldn't have the judgment, nor would we have the expectation. And for me, whenever we have expectation, it inevitably always ends in disappointment, because an expectation is very rigid and narrow-minded. It's a very narrow view of life. So I think this is like a cultural base that is really leaves us with very unfertile soil beneath our feet to actually live life. And we're, it puts us in a place of comparison. And whenever we compare, we will probably end up feeling like we fall short of whatever we're measuring ourselves to, right? So it perpetuates this scarcity, lack, not good enough, not enough. I don't have enough. I don't have this. It's the gaping hole. It's the void that I honestly think society and the way that this world has been run for thousands of years contributes purposefully to that, I will say. So if we were to look at, let's begin with soulmates. What are soulmates? So even spirituality will have you think that, your soulmate is your perfect half. Some people now say twin flame, right? It's the other side of your soul, and it completes you. And it's kind of like, the broken locket that comes together and creates a heart, and voila, happily ever after, right? Your soulmate is the person that just sees you, understands you, loves you, accepts you, all of these things, and there's no problem, and everything is just, skipping through fields of daisies. That's what we're kind of taught, right? The thing is a soulmate isn't actually necessarily always put in the category of a romantic partnership. A soulmate is someone that you could say is a soul that you know. Maybe you've had many lifetimes with. Could even be a soul that has contracted a certain experience with you to say, okay, I volunteer to play this role in your life if you play that role in my life. And these are the lessons that we want to learn and what we want to work through and experience together. So this idea that it's this kind of like shiny charm and it's going to complete you and make you feel whole is a bit of a fallacy. It's a bit of an illusion. And we can have multiple soulmates, that I personally find that soulmates are people that you share a pretty significant part of your life, no matter how long or short it is, but they leave an impact. And that could come as a partner, husband, wife, lover, child, best friend, work colleague. They could come in so many different forms. So I'm going to set aside for a moment the kind of fantasy of how we would like to look at soulmates and twin flames, because I do think that there are souls that we deeply know. I think there are souls that maybe we've been paired with in other lives, like maybe since the dawn of time. We don't always meet each other in every lifetime, but I do believe that you have a soul family. But even if you meet that person, I do believe that there's a recognition, like you just have this feeling like you really know each other, but that doesn't mean that life is just going to be happily ever after. Sometimes they are, in fact, the people that will test you the most. And again, getting out of this idea that when we have the partner or the home or the job or the car or the certain amount of kids or the dog, and that then we've landed, that whole concept, I think we need to throw it away, because every relationship takes effort. It can be wonderful. It can be something that, like, yes, I want to work on this. But to just feel like it's going to be free floating, free ride, that's pretty rare. Every now and again, maybe two souls have been like, you know what, let's have an easy life this life. Let's just canoe down the like gentle river, and we're not going to have too much. It's kind of, some people will say it's like a rest life. I think it was Dolores Cannon that said, some people choose to kind of have a rest life where it's a little bit easy. I definitely have not chosen a rest life. And sometimes I think, I'm done. This is my last round on earth. I can't wait to be like back in my soul home, put my feet up, have my oxygen cocktail, whatever the hell it is up there, and just take a break, have a holiday. So if I look at my life, I definitely, I remember one of my first soulmates was my second long-term relationship that I had. And I just had a knowing that we had known each other before. And I had visions of this was when I lived in California and by the redwoods, and I saw visions of us in, as Native American Indians in past lives. And we were really there to support each other's spiritual growth, that I look back on it and go, that's exactly what it was, and I did think that we were going to get married and have kids, as you do in your 20s, you think that that's the trajectory. And then it became clear that at a certain point our growth was going in different directions. And, we really supported each other through the breakup and the moving on. And I will always look back at that relationship and be really grateful. We weren't meant to stay together forever, but really grateful for how we propelled each other on our spiritual path. So, that to me was absolutely contracted. I think all of our significant relationships are. So I had already been, different relationships in my 20s, kind of almost three long-term relationships in my 20s. And then when I came out of my last one and I moved to Europe, it was the first time that I really, really worked on manifesting. Now, I had this vision, I don't remember when, but earlier in my life, I remember having a vision of a man, and he had kind of blondish hair, slightly wavy, like a little bit of a curl, these blue eyes that were like a kind of blue eyes that I just couldn't describe, like a very rare kind of blue eyes. And I saw cobblestones. And that was the image. I just remember seeing it at some point in my life. So I was working, so I'll put that to the side. That was just something that I remember seeing that flash at some point. So there was about 6 weeks where I, every single night, was visioning. This is when manifestation had a very different set of rules to what I think the laws are these days. But every night I was visioning meeting my soulmate. I had this vision that kept on coming in as to I was invited to go to this kind of, I knew it wasn't a restaurant, but it wasn't a bar, but it was something quite in between, but I didn't know what it was. Coming from California, I'll explain that in a moment. And I saw things very specifically, like that I'd met a group of friends and I was sitting at the corner of the table, and then this man came in, and at one point he was sitting across from me and at one point to the side of me. And then at one point people got up and left, and then they came back, and there were these very specific moments. So anyway, fast forward to the end of the 6 weeks, and I get invited to go have some drinks with a friend of mine from San Francisco. She had an ex-boyfriend that lived in London, and she said, why don't you meet him? He can hopefully introduce you to people, to friends, maybe help you find a place, all of these things. And I almost didn't go because it was a typical rainy day in London, but I ended up going. And while I was there, I met one of his friends who would become my future husband, now ex-husband. And he had blonde, kind of wavy hair. I didn't clock this at first. He had a very kind of specific blue eye. At one point, he was sitting across from me. At another point, he was sitting to my left, just in the scene. All the rest of the people at one point got up and went outside to have a cigarette, and then they came back in. And it was a pub. And of course, in California, there aren't pubs. So it's kind of a slash between a bar and a restaurant. So my vision was, very, very, very accurate. So we end up dating, and in the first 6 months, I definitely have some red flags. I really actually have some red flags. And he it wasn't last minute, he had it planned, but he only told me like 2 weeks before that he was going to South America to travel. He said it was only going to be a month, and ended up being 2 months. Even though he knew it was 2 months. But anyway, there was a lot of red flags. And I remember thinking, you know what? No, I don't think I want to be in this. And I remember speaking to the ex-boyfriend that I told you about, who had been an earlier relationship, not my most recent one before, but the earlier one that I mentioned before. And he's like, yeah, but Corinne, I haven't ever heard you be so happy. I don't think you should give up on it. So I'm like, okay. And, with my ex-husband, we created a center together. We traveled a lot. There was a lot of things that I can look back and say, yeah, that was amazing. We did a lot of really great things. And, fast forward we end up having a child together and getting married and doing big things in our lives. Now, you know how I told you at the beginning that that my hypnotherapist was at the altar, going, I'm marrying this guy, but I'm not going to end up with him. I'm not going to stay with him, and she knew she had to go through it. So before we got engaged, we were in Sicily. We were just taking like a long weekend away. And I remember being in the bathroom in the morning, and I just had this thought, this intuition come in that he's like, I wonder if he's going to propose today. And we didn't talk about it at all. If anything, actually, we'd had a conversation about potentially, like I was almost going to walk away from it. This was, I don't know, 4.5 years into our relationship. And I had some moments where I'm like, you know what, I'm done with this again. And I just had this intuition. I was like, I wonder if he's going to propose. And my first thought was, I wonder what I'm going to say. Like, am I going to say yes or no? It wasn't this like, oh, I'm excited. Yes. I'm like, I wonder what I'm going to say. So that afternoon, fast forward, and we're on this beach, and I can see him like on his knee, kind of, but digging into the ground. And of course, my intuition is like, he's going to ask you. And again, I thought, what am I going to say? And he asked, and I heard nothing. I heard nothing. So because I didn't hear a no, I said yes. And the thing is that I was very happy. I was really happy. And, when I look back, there were a lot of like wonderful things about it. And it was a relationship where I know I had a contract with him. I know I had a contract with him. And, part of that contract was, to create this center and to do all of these things and to have our child. But the last, 3.5 years that were just really hard for me, very kind of lonely, because he was traveling all the time for work and kind of saying that he was supporting his family through it, but not actually being very present. And I basically felt like a single mom without the perks, living in the middle of the countryside in a new country with a new language and, not having any support. And it was really hard. And my whole kind of career, shrunk in, and because I was a mom and I was in a different country and all of these things. And I remember, as the years went by, just it was like the slow demise. And I'm a type of person that really, I will work on something, sometimes a little bit too long. I will stay in something a little bit too long because I really want to I want to know that I gave it my absolute all. And I remember the beginning of like 2015, and I was in California visiting my mom at the time, and we hadn't seen each other for 3 weeks. And he flew out, because he was working on the center, and then he flew out, and we were going to spend the summer, a little bit of time at my mom's and then over at his parents on the other side of the country. And, I was like, it had been 3 weeks. And so I was excited to see him. And I even had, my mom take care of our daughter just while I went to go pick him up it was actually from the airport. And I'm someone I'm emotionally centered. I'm heart centered. If you know the Enneagram, I'm in the heart triad. He was in the intellectual triad, so very, very different. They challenge each other a lot, let's just say, because they come from two totally different centers of gravity. And so here in my kind of romantic mind, I thought, I'm seeing my, my husband, and we haven't seen each other in 3-4 weeks or something like this. And here I'm expecting a hug and an embrace and a kiss. And it's like, I don't have the baby. So we can, just have a moment just as we drive home. And I remember he came out of the bus, and it was like he was just talking about his trip. He kind of gave me a bit of a hug. I don't even remember if there was a kiss. And I remember thinking, whoa, what the fuck is this? Like it might have been just like a friend that I kind of knew, And for me, that was like, oh, okay. This is not the level of love that I want. And a lot of change happened. That's when we ended up moving away from London and into, different country and countryside. And I brought it up at the end of that summer for when we had our anniversary of just like, this isn't, I'm not happy. I'm not happy. This isn't, I'm willing to work through these things, but this isn't the depth of connection that I'm really wanting. And his weakness was denial and just brushing things under the rug and like, oh, it's fine. Everything's fine, And clearly things weren't fine. And 3.5 years later, they really, really weren't fine. And the final moment for me was, there were many moments, but I remember we were watching the film Call Me By Your Name. And one of the final scenes, I was like in tears because what came up for me, I don't know if you've seen the film or not, I don't want to give anything away, but it was like the love that they had was the love that I wanted. Like to be able to love that deeply and that profoundly, because I'm a deep person. And when I love, I really fucking love. I really want to give my heart to that person and to allow them to, for me, vulnerability, open-heartedness, transparency, that kind of connection, not through codependence, but through like, real, the willingness to be open, to be exposed, to be vulnerable. And I'm aware of how I might armor myself sometimes and protect myself because of my childhood and everything, but I've done a lot of work around it. But I remember crying and I remember looking at him and saying, I want to love like that. And that's not this. Like, I don't get to love you the way that I want to love, because he had so much armor around his heart, and couldn't really penetrate it and couldn't really go deep and didn't have an emotional language or, a pool. I remember at one point he even described after we'd separated that it's like, he's like, Corinne, this is my little circle here. Like if you bring your fingers together and you make a circle, that's my level of kind of emotional intelligence, shall we say. And he's like, yours is way out here. And he's like, and there's all this space outside of my circle that I can't see. And I thought, actually, that's pretty well articulated, So when we divorced, you know how they say you go through the whatever it's 7 layers of grief, or I don't remember how many it is and what they exactly are, but I definitely went through those layers. And there was a period where I remember being really angry. And I was also angry in part because, he was in denial city, when I had said, I'm not happy in this marriage. And he had blamed it on something else that I was like, no, that's not it. It's actually just that I'm not happy in this marriage. So there was already a level of denial. And when we finally separated, it was like he was supportive and, we supported each other in it and wanted to do it as consciously as possible and, had that intention. But he jumped straight into another relationship before he'd even moved out of the house. And so there was no processing. I had to hold everything on that level, and then had to bring, there was this other woman and coming in and into the community and, with my child and there was no space in between, to just process. And so, of course, that brought up a lot. And so one of the stages was anger, but a lot of it was actually the anger at myself, I realized. And this is what I want to talk to today, because I think this is a really important part, is that sometimes, I was having messages with a dear friend of mine this morning, and she was expressing the anger that she has about her life is actually towards herself, of like, why did I make these decisions? God, like, fuck, I'm such a dumbass. Why did I make these decisions? If I hadn't made these series of decisions, I wouldn't be at this point in my life. So I had that. I had I married the wrong person. I had a child with the wrong person. Why did I do that? All I ever wanted was to have the family that I never had growing up. I didn't grow up with my father. He was a crazy man. He was a narcissist. He was not a good, safe person to be around. And, my mom finally escaped and we got out and, she remarried and we left the country. And, I'm grateful that I didn't grow up with him, but there was the part of me that, I'm not going to do it like that, right? And I had different father figures growing up, and I knew exactly what I wanted, and I knew exactly the feeling. I still know that feeling. And, for a short period of time, I had that feeling. There was a sense of, family. And it was the first time in my life where I could do my work and be in a relationship and, have a child. Whereas a lot of times in my life before, it was like I can either have my work going really well or be in a relationship. But it was very hard for me to have them meet and be in the same world together. So there was a period of time where I felt like I had that, but then that kind of very quickly started to deteriorate. And, so you do have those moments where you're like, well, shit, this isn't what I wanted. Why the hell? Like, why did this happen? How did I end up here? How did I make these decisions? Should I have left? Should I have this, that, and the other? And then I go back and I'm like, yeah, but I had the flash of his face. So my soul was alerting me to, I had a contract with this man. We're meant to have a child. I mean, a lot of people will say the child chooses the parents because of whatever the genetic requirements to be who they're going to be in this lifetime. And you have an agreement. So, could I say that he was a type of soulmate? Yeah, because we had a contract. So sometimes it's a hard truth, to kind of take a bite out of, because you go, well, how could that have been, a soulmate? Or how I could really berate myself. And I've been there. I've definitely been there. Could berate myself from totally fucking up my life and making terrible decisions. And, here I was like running courses and workshops and one-on-ones on how to manifest your soulmate, because I had manifested it to the T. And we were together for almost a decade, so it wasn't like it was nothing. But I think we have to understand what is a soulmate. And so after I got divorced, I was like, well, if I'm going to be doing this work, I don't want to call it a soulmate because of what the idea that people have. And it's like, here I am, a divorcee. Like, how the hell can you like be promoting this, right? And you've divorced. And actually, I remember it was Catherine Woodward Thomas. And I remember reading Calling in the One. And actually, I really studied that a lot and did some courses and read the book and incorporated into my own work. And then she too got divorced. And she too was like, oh shit, I can't be doing this anymore. I feel like, I'm a farce. I'm a liar. I'm a whatever, these things. And then she ended up writing the book Conscious Uncoupling. And so she had to go through her own shame and her own kind of feeling like, she's there's some kind of artificialness or fakeness or whatever. And the thing is, if we go back to what I said in the beginning, if we could just get out of the idea of what life should look like, the expectations, the parameters, the definitions, and we just recognize it's experience after experience after experience, then we wouldn't have the shame, because we wouldn't be measuring it by some like list of standards, some rules that say, well, this is what is good and bad and right and wrong. This is how you should do it. And this is how you shouldn't do it. Right? So I remember thinking, yeah, I totally get how she would feel. And so then my work moved more into just really wanting to support people. And if they wanted to call in a relationship, great. But the first relationship that you cultivate is with yourself. And that was always at the base of my work, was always the authentic self. But there was a period where I was kind of like disillusioned by it. I'm like, I don't believe in soulmates. And the thing is it's not that I do or don't believe in soulmates, but I think I look at it more in less of a romantic way, not to take away the magic. There can still be plenty of magic, but also looking at it very kind of, well, I want to say realistically, but that sounds very cold and dry. It's more just that point of neutrality of, I am a soul having a human experience, and my soul is curious about having certain human experiences. And for whatever reason, that kind of marriage and then divorce and everything after is something that my soul's like, yep, I'm going to try that one out this lifetime. And my human self is like, fuck you, this isn't fun. I mean, I divorced many, many years ago and had been in another long-term relationship after that. And for me, everyone has a different relationship to relationship. I always viewed relationship as a spiritual teaching. I always wanted to use relationship, whether I came out of it, for me, it didn't feel like a failure. I never had this like, oh, I have to be with someone for the rest of my life. There was a part of me that felt like that would be really nice. Maybe also because I didn't have the stability and security as a child. But I actually think it's quite rare these days. And there's various reasons for that. One is because the paradigm of marriage is not as it once was. People stayed married because it was shameful to get divorced, but it didn't mean that they were happy. And then the pendulum has swung, I think, a little bit to the other extreme, that really the family has been pulled apart by certain agendas, broken the family and broken the values of family. And so I think we're needing to recalibrate and find the equilibrium, the balance point between both extremes. Because I still actually will always believe in sacred union. And I think that we are incredibly powerful as humans when two whole people come together and are really in service to each other and to a divine source, whatever you want to call that divine source. I really think that is when humans are just like incredibly powerful. And I do think that there's a reason, not just biologically, but I also think spiritually, there's a reason why we want to be in partnership and in union. I think a lot of the reason why people want to be in that these days is because they don't want to be alone, because they don't feel whole without someone. There's a lot of wounding. There's a lot of trauma that I think we as a collective need to work through. But I think if we go into the spiritual aspect of it, because there's such potency in unionship when it's healthy, when it's coming from two whole individuals and two whole individuals that are connected to themselves, to each other, and to divine source. I was listening to it was a male coach, I forget his name, and it was showing a snippet of Teal Swan talking about how it is so biologically incorrect for a mother to be single, a single mother. And the way she was describing it, of course, everyone can have their own perspective, but she was saying, the husband, the father's role is not necessarily primarily to be a good father. His primary role is to be a really good partner, to really take care of the mother, to make sure that she feels safe and secure and supported and held and nourished so that she can give herself as a mother to the children. And, you can have different views on that. I think the feminist movement has really messed up our psychology of the beautiful and natural roles of a man and a woman, of the masculine and feminine, of mother and father, of husband and wife. So I'm not going to go too deep on that today, but I do think that has psychologically kind of warped our minds a little bit, because there are natural, beautiful roles that we shine in, we expand within, because the masculine wants to provide, wants to protect. I think a lot of men are lost right now because they have nothing to fucking protect. Well, they actually have loads to protect, but they've been so emasculated and shamed, that being a man and being in the masculine has been so shamed by society that they've kind of retracted. And actually the world really needs men to step up right now and protect us, protect the world. And I heard actually something that was really beautiful. It's actually a woman that was reading off a conversation she had had with ChatGPT, and I've never used ChatGPT. I'm a little bit I haven't ventured into the realm of AI. I'm not sure I like it, but anyway, it was very, very fascinating, the response, because they were saying that a man's role isn't to save the world right now. A man's role right now is to create that foundation. I think it described it as it's like the stones around the circle that just, it holds the space. It's like, this is the structure. It's strong. It's fucking fierce. It's there to protect and provide, so that the women, ChatGPT was saying, the women are going to be the ones that lead and change the world. And I have to say that resonates, because, I say, yeah, men are running the world, but I don't even call them real men. I call them psychopaths. I don't know. I'm not even convinced they're human. But it's not going to change through purely well, it's not going to change through the systems that have been running the world, right? It wasn't Einstein that said, insanity is when you try to change something with the same thinking that created the problem in the first place, right? I do think, there was a resurrection of the feminine. There's the resurrection of women coming into their power. But where I think the feminist movement went wrong is that it made women show up in the world as men and not as women. There's that image of the woman with a muscle, right? Yeah, that's feminism. That's independence. We're emancipating ourselves. No, that was women needing to be men. And look at what happened. Women literally wear men's clothes to work. They wear suits, right? And women now, in this resurrection of the divine feminine, have this opportunity to show up as women. Women of the earth and women of the stars. But they need men to come out of their caves, to not be ashamed of who they are as men, and to really fiercely, through their absolute love and devotion, protect these women. They need to be those rocks around the circle so that women can really do the magic that we are here to do. So I know it seems like I've gone off on a tangent, but where's all of this pointing to? I think we're at this point in evolution right now where I'm sure if you're listening to this podcast, to this particular episode, you have something with relationship, whether you've been divorced or maybe you're still single or the guy isn't coming in or the woman isn't coming in. I know I'm speaking primarily to women here, but we're women, especially what I've noticed about single women is that we're no longer willing to go into old patterns, into old forms of toxicity, trauma bonds, codependency. But what I want to impart right now is we're at a point, we're at the precipice of doing things very differently. There's going to be a new form of relationship that is going to come in that is going to be of a much greater spiritual nature, that is going to be that kind of the union that I was talking about earlier. But we have to clean up our past. We have to face and work with and alchemize the wound. And so what I want to impart here is that when we look back at our life, instead of looking at it in the way of like, God, all of the wrong choices that I made, all of the mistakes, everywhere where I went wrong, where I should have done this, shoulda, woulda, coulda, to actually look at it and go, okay, but what can I garner from that? What were the gifts? What were the lessons? What were the contracts? And sometimes even to look at it, I had this thought the other day when I was brushing my teeth. It was like, I could look back at my life and go, God, I feel like a failure. I had all of this potential and all of these people that were saying you're going to be that amazing this and this amazing that. And, I look back and go, God, that my life as a professional dancer didn't come into fruition, or as a choreographer or as an actress, or, sometimes I even think as an author or as a coach or this or that. I could look back and say, well, God, Corinne, it's been one big failure. Or I could look back and go, wow, but I've had all of these experiences. And even if, I'm not going to lie, there's sometimes really the deep pain of feeling like not one aspect fully came into fruition. Like, my career as a ballet dancer was cut short because of an injury. And I feel sometimes so sad. I never got to dance Juliet. And that was what made me fall in love with dance, and that was forever kind of just like a stake in my heart. But I look back and, I was looking at these photos that came up on my phone of when I was a student and I was probably 15, 16 years old, and, pictures of me in the studio and flying through this sky in this grand jeté. And I'm like, wow, but you know what? I had that experience. At least I had that experience. And one of my actually ballet teachers had commented on a different post actually. And so I was just remembering her and I was remembering those memories and really fond of that. And it's like, okay, I didn't go in the direction that I thought I would go in or that other people expected I would go in. And, even though that's a whole other thing, but I can look back and go, oh, but I remember those times in the studio. I remember with Mel Marby. I remember performing, I remember the first time I was like 11 and performed Clara in the Nutcracker in my class. My Waldorf school class came, and they used to always make fun of me because they thought I was such a bunhead. I came to school literally with a freaking bun in my head because I'd have to go to ballet after, and, they'd tease me, and then they came and saw me perform, and they were like, oh, wow, like this is the real thing, and there was a whole level of respect that all of a sudden came in. And I remember those moments, and I look back at my life and I remember moments. And even though there's been a lot of hard times, like there's a lot of struggle, a lot of pain, a lot of disappointment, a lot of what could be seen as failure. And still to this day, this morning I was like, I'm in this constipation in life right now where nothing is changing. Still the scenario with the house. And I could go, what the hell is up with my life? But the way that we reflect upon it and how we choose to see it, some moments I'm not going to see it through nice lens at all. And sometimes I can look through it and go, wow, at least I've had these experiences. And, I definitely haven't come for a holiday life. It's not what my soul signed up for. And sometimes I got beef with my soul. I'm not going to lie to you. Sometimes I really got beef with my soul. I got beef with God. I've got beef with the universe. And yet when I share this and I reflect, it's like, but what can you do? It's just life. It's just an experience after an experience. And, I've learned, and one of my dear, dear friends will always say, Corinne, you move through things so quickly. And I think the reason why I move through things so quickly, it's because I don't suppress and I don't deny. I feel. But I've also experienced enough of life now to know that there's always the other side. There's always the other side. And the more that you feel your feelings and you are terribly honest with yourself, the faster you'll move through things. Because a lot of our society is built on denial, distraction, illusion. Let's just tuck that away. Let's just put the skeletons in the closet. Let's sweep it under the rug. Let's just have the elephant in the room. And you know what? When you're awake and you're aware and you're looking at your shit, and it doesn't make you perfect. I'm not saying ever that I'm perfect and I have my shit sorted out and that I'm right and I'm higher or better than you. No way. I am messily human like anyone else. But I'm not running away from it. I would love to... I did a video on this on Friday. I would love to really share more transparently. I would love to share the messiness and the beauty and the divinity of being human with more people. And the video that I put up on Friday, I was like, is it safe to do that here? Is social media safe for that? Because the thing is that you will get all sorts of responses. You will get projection. You'll get pity, which I never pity myself. You'll get people that want to fix you, tell you who you should be, who you shouldn't be, do this, don't do that. You'll get everything. And sometimes I feel like, I'm too sensitive a soul that I'm like, I don't want to subject myself to that. And then I also know that I have balls of steel and that I haven't been here to be a daisy, but I'm a warrior of a certain type. And I want to be a warrior that is here to be transparent and to be vulnerable and to be human and to show all shades of being human. But sometimes it's scary. And sometimes I can see where the armor in me lies. And there is this, conundrum that I'm in because I want to be open and vulnerable. And also it's not always a safe place to be. And so I do have maybe a little bit of reserve, a little bit of protection, a little bit of privacy, because I'm also a very private person. And yet I also think we need to share our stories. So, I shared a little bit today about, I would have to talk for too long to talk about my marriage and everything after. And I'm also sensitive to the fact of when you're talking about an experience that involves more than one person, more than yourself, there's a respect for that person as well. But, not everything is shiny and rosy. I remember when I was getting divorced, I had one friend being like, but what? You guys make such an amazing couple and the way you look and it's like this and that. And I'm like, yeah, but nothing. The cover of the book does not explain the pages within it. And so much, it's very hard to see life through a clear lens, to be objective. It's never going to be purely objective. And most of the time, we're projecting our own stuff on what we believe other people to be, who they are, what their life is like. And social media is such a detrimental but poignant example of that, where we're glorifying somebody else's lives and comparing ourselves to them because we think it's all shiny and beautiful and they have so many likes and so many followers and they have this and that and the other. And you have no idea what their inner world is like. You have no idea. And the truth of it is that we all experience joy and terror, happiness and sadness, ease and challenge. It's welcome to being human. Welcome to being human. I think if we could share more of our human stories, our armor would soften, our heart would soften, we'd open up with greater compassion. And unfortunately, the internet has made for a lot of bullies out there that are not dealing with their own pain, that just want to win an argument or want to tell you what to do or who you are and who you should be. And, they just want to be right. It's just getting to such an extreme point that people would rather be right than create world peace. They want to be in the argument because they want to be right. They want their side to win. And I see that a lot in relationship as well, There isn't the want to collaborate to come to peace. There's the want to fight to be right. But it takes a brave soul to follow your heart. It takes a brave soul to go off onto the beaten track. It's not easy being human, folks. But every experience leads us to something, and there's always something to evolve through and grow out of. And, not that I want to stay in that you can only have a good story if you suffer. I think we're coming out of that paradigm that actually now we can tell a story through bliss and joy and compassion and peace and collaboration. But up until this point, of course, it's the struggle and the suffering and the challenge and the breaking of illusions and expectations. And I thought my life was going to be this, and it's not that, and it's that, and this, and the other. That's made me who I am today. That's given me a certain wisdom. That's given me a certain grounding and depth and ability to just be with my human experience because I've fucking been through it. And then some. And I know you have your own version. You have your own story. And so none of us are alone in this. None of us. You haven't done anything wrong. You haven't made bad decisions or wrong decisions. And if you have made bad or wrong decisions, there's always something to glean from it. And there's always another choice that you can make in the future. But we have to get out of judgment. We have to get out of self-blame. And you know what? Some mornings you'll be there being like, I'm such an idiot. I'm such a dumbass. God, I made so many bad decisions. Jesus Christ, how did I end up here? Welcome. Welcome to being human. Welcome to life not being the Truman Show and having it be all perfect. That is a total illusion. We're here to be messy and poetic in that messiness because that's where poetry comes. It comes from where dark meets light, from where grit meets beauty. So that's it. There's no invitation today other than just the invitation to reflect on your life and how can you see it not as a mistake, but as a life lived. And if you've been playing it safe, then go out there and get messy. Go out there and throw your heart open and paint beautiful colors across the sky with the spirit of who you are. And through all of it, the ultimate journey is remembering who we are as a soul. And that our soul is on a journey here, having this messy experience of being human and loving it. Our soul fucking loves it. Our human is like, no, I don't like it. Not always, at least. So I just wanted to share that with you. And as always, I ask, if you feel moved to comment, I always love to hear people's own story. We're here to share and what it's like to be human. Be mindful if you have a judgment. Be mindful if you have something that you feel like you need to tell me to be or to do. That's not why we're here. We're here to listen. We're here to share. We're here to have this human experience. And there is no manual. There is no one size fits all. So the art of listening and having compassion, empathy is a profound skill and art to have. And if you feel like being in the arena with me and sharing your own story, then please do. And I'm here to listen. Not to tell you what to do or who to be, but just to listen. We need to do a hell of a lot more of that. It's just listen. Truly listen without already thinking about what we're going to say in response. Truly listen with an open, compassionate heart. So there it is. I guess I could say, as always, take it or leave it as feels right for you. But today wasn't really any kind of an invitation, but more of a sharing. But loving you from afar. That I know I can do. You've been listening to Raw Conversations with Corinne Bloom. Thanks so much for showing up, listening in, and being a part of the conversation with me.